And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RCPA chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Fighting downside SPD off. Bring in SPD off. Off. It's orange! 145!
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage. Put that in the big bag, Eagle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
The methane would be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You dead? We don't need any more of these.
Good evening. You are taking a live look right now at Space Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, where another Falcon 9 is ready to launch more V2 Mini Starlink internet satellites on Starlink 6-58. But as always, this is not just your ordinary Starlink. In fact, there's a lot of fun facts that we'll get to cover with this one. First off, I see the 5x5s, and those of you that recognize me, I am Sawyer Rosenstein. I will be your host for this evening's launch. As always, though, it is not just me. We have a fantastic team that helps make all of this happen. And so joining me on commentary will be Trevor Sesnick. Trevor, how's it going?
I'm doing great. You know, one of the stats that we'll talk about here in a bit is this is SpaceX's 50th launch of the year, and it is May. So it's just absurd how many of these we're getting to see, and that makes me happy.
Remember, the original goal was 144 this year. Things are picking up. And, of course, also joining us from the field is the birthday girl herself, Julia Bergeron. Julia, first, happy birthday, and second, how are you?
Well, thank you, Sawyer. I am well, and it is a beautiful day out here to light a birthday candle. On the topic of how many launches are we at, this is the 36th launch from the Space Coast this year. So of those SpaceX launches, many of them came from here, but this year a lot of them are also coming from the other coast.
Yeah, we know the whole deal with the two different coasts, but yeah, I think it's still crazy that that's how many we're at already. So hopefully we get you that birthday candle. And then in the background, pushing the buttons, pulling the levers, making all of these photons reach your screens is Mr. Kevin Michael Reed. And we can't forget, of course, the person providing you the camera views right now is Mr. Max Evans. We also have additional views out in the field from D-Wise. So we've got the full team out and ready to go for this, and I believe Sean has actually made his way over from Starbase to also join Julia over at Cars Park to watch this one too. So hopefully we'll get some fantastic views, both in terms of video and pictures for this launch. But in particular for this launch, let's talk a little bit about the mission itself. Trevor, do you mind giving us a quick overview?
Yeah, of course. So as you mentioned, this is Starlink Group 6-58. As you can see from the top left, we currently have liftoff in approximately 55 minutes at 20:53 local time, 0053 UTC on May the 13th. This will take another 23 Starlink V2 mini satellites into low Earth orbit. This is back to the regular initial insertion orbit, unlike the previous launch, which put them about 20 kilometers higher. That launch seemed to be fully successful. SpaceX has post-launch data for all of the satellites. However, on this mission, they are choosing to go back into the lower orbital insertion. The booster today will be B1073-15, the 9th booster to reach 15 flights, and also the quickest a booster will have ever reached 15 flights. Of course, launching from Slick 40, as you can see, and we'll be landing on a Shortfall of Gravitas, which was tugged downrange by Signet Warhorse III. And using that drone ship, SpaceX was able to get a crazy turnaround time for this drone ship. This will be the quickest turnaround time of a landing zone ever, at 4 days, 6 hours, and 11 minutes. The previous record was just read the instructions at 4 days, 23 hours, and 51 minutes. So they're cutting off, what is that, 23 minus 6, 17 hours from that, which is substantial when they're already at 4-day turnaround. And Alex is pointing out this is the 69th landing on a Shortfall of Gravitas, so that's pretty nice.
Nice, indeed.
But yeah, it's a lot of exciting stuff on this one. So I think Julia will tell us more about some of the booster history.
I certainly can do that. As you're saying, this is one of the youngest boosters or the youngest booster to hit 15 launches. And ironically, it is almost exactly 2 years old. Its first mission was a Starlink, Starlink Group 4-15, May 14th, 2022. Then we did an SES mission, SF-22, 1-2 Starlinks, and then Hakuto R. That was a landing zone mission. Amazonas, a CRS, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Starlinks before Bandwagon, and that brings us today. So a lot of our higher flight boosters obviously take a lot of Starlink missions to space, but 2-year-old booster, 15 launches is pretty impressive.
That is very impressive. Again, the cadence with everything still blows my mind at the Cape, where, again, today even, you've got booster 1069 that's ready to be transported away from the port, and 1083 is there after completing its mission. You've got all of these crazy turnaround times, and I love it. And I also love the fact that before we even went live, we've already been getting some fantastic support from people that I want to thank before we get into your questions. And a reminder, if you have any questions, you can tag us at NASA Spaceflight, and we will do our best to answer as many of them as we can. Bobby, thank you for becoming a PadRat member. Geraldine, thank you as well for becoming a PadRat member. And Ronald, thank you for becoming a PadRat member. John Depker, a name that we see here quite often, gifting 10 Red Team memberships. Thank you so much for that, as well as RC Horseman gifting 5. If you did get one of those gifted memberships, please make sure to give them a big thank you. And then John Depker coming in again with the super chat saying, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Be it a Starship test or a Starlink launch, y'all are the best, especially when things go off the rails. I don't know so much about the last part, but I appreciate the rest of that. Thank you. And this person, D Wise, I think, I don't know where I've heard that name before, becoming a Red Team member. So, yeah. I mean, I guess a member of NSF originally, and now finally, welcome to the Red Team there, D. Musical Wolves here. 2 messages. One saying press the like button to get Julia a cupcake. And then also asking, will these be going into a higher orbit because of the geomagnetic storms that are still predicted soon? Trevor, do we know?
No, these are not. So these are going to be inserted into the normal 284 by 292 kilometer orbit at 43 degrees. I think, so I haven't been following the solar storm super closely. I think that the worst parts of it are over, and we can talk a little bit about some of the interesting effects that's had on both GPS and Starlink over the previous few days. And of course, just giving us the beautiful photos that everyone's been seeing all over X and whatever other social media apps you use. But no plans to put this into a higher orbit like the last batch.
Yeah, that seemed to be a one and done kind of deal with that.
Yeah, this is actually something that's quite interesting, since they obviously have the slight more performance available on the vehicle, given that they've now done a Starlink launch with 24 satellites and a Starlink launch with 23 satellites that have gone into a higher initial orbit. It's really making me wonder, why don't they choose one of these as standard? Why haven't they switched to fully launching 24 satellites? Or why don't they always go into this higher orbit to increase the lifetime of Starlink satellites? But SpaceX has people far, far smarter than me, so I'm sure they have a good reason.
Yeah, it's not rocket science or anything. Oh, wait. Well, I guess it's not. It's orbital mechanics. Continuing along, though. Let's talk about the solar storms while we're at it right now. I believe the last that I saw today was that it would give you up to a G4. In terms of reference for the strength of those geomagnetic storms, what we saw on Friday was considered a G5. Yesterday was a G3. So this is kind of in between there, but it could definitely overperform, as we saw as well on Friday, to the point where you can see the aurora all the way down in the Space Coast. And this is Julia's photo from that night. Again, all the way down here at the Space Coast in Florida, Cape Canaveral. Think Orlando, Disney getting aurora and not just the one from the movie. It's crazy to me. But
Absolutely was crazy to think a northern lights scenario could be captured in central Florida. And I have lived up north and I only saw it once in northern Wisconsin, very faintly. So to be able to use a camera to see that, absolutely amazing.
it really is, and all these fantastic photos from our team, including Max, capturing amazing shots with his phone. I think that's even more impressive than if he were to do it with one of his actual fancy cameras that he's got out there. So shout out to Max for that as well. As great as it looks, though, it does cause the potential concern for the Starlinks. And this goes right along with the question from CD, who asked, has Starlink been affected by the geomagnetic storms? And what about other satellites? And as you can see right there, the tweet from Elon Musk that basically said that, pull it up so I can actually read it. There we go. You can see the scale on it there. Major geomagnetic solar storm happening right now. Biggest in a long time. Starlink satellites are under a lot of pressure, but holding up so far. And there is also a report from Reuters that there was a warning sent out to users of Starlink of a quote-unquote degraded service during this time period. And in fact, our very own Harry Stranger posted this showing his Starlink usage. And as he put it quite perfectly, Starlink is definitely getting its butt kicked right now. So, Trevor, as you were kind of alluding to, it's not just these Starlink satellites that are getting affected, even though obviously with 7,500 or so of them, it tends to be an area of focus.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think Starlink is still probably more reliable than my Comcast internet in this magnetic storm, which is impressive and sad on Comcast's behalf. But yes, Starlink is definitely the biggest or one where we've seen the most change in it, and that's just because, as you were saying, SpaceX has actually, this is a stat that we should have brought up earlier. This launch will take SpaceX to 6,000 satellites on orbit, which is just incredible. But we've also been seeing like GPS has been slightly less accurate and some of the other constellations. So this is just a very, very harsh thing for these satellites to go through for communications and all of that. So thankfully, everything seems to be fine so far, but I'm sure those Starlink engineers have been getting some very nice and useful data that they can use for making the system more robust in the future.
Exactly. And I mean, this is something that we've been warning about for years with these giant solar flares and increased solar activity, is that you do run the risk of interrupting satellite TV, satellite communications, satellite internet, satellite radio, things like that. It's always a risk. In fact, if you watch local television, I'm sure they have been scrambling for the last couple of days as well to make sure that their feed still gets out clean, and that when it comes to network programming, they get that in clean as well. the space weather was monitored very closely when I used to work in TV news. And I should point out that in terms of the official launch forecast from the 45th Weather Squadron, they label solar activity as a moderate to high additional risk criteria. So, not bad, but definitely not nothing. Here's another question, and this one's for you, Julia. Joe asking, jellyfish opportunity, question mark?
Oh, well, Max and I were talking about that a little bit earlier, and the sun is basically at that perfect point in the horizon right now, and obviously that rocket isn't quite ready for launch. With that being said, if you are downrange, there is a good chance that second stage could get high enough to still capture some of that sunlight and give a jellyfish effect. Luckily, as far as clouds go, I can say at least Max and D should have a pretty good downrange view for you all as long as the clouds stay where they're at now. They're somewhat light, but a little bit offshore. So good luck if you're downrange. You might have that higher chance with the second stage.
And for those of you trying to figure out, am I downrange? You see on the screen there the trajectory map of where this flight is expected to go. This going back to the southeasterly trajectory that we're used to seeing here for the Starlink missions. And in terms of when you might be able to see it, this one launching from Slick 40. Here's a fun little animation that was made by Ryan Caton here at NSF that really shows when to go out and look up to see if you can see the launch. About a minute after launch is when Orlando gets to see it, shortly after Daytona as well. Tampa and Jacksonville getting closer to the 2-minute mark. That's when also West Palm Beach area gets their shot at it. About 2:45 in is when you get Fort Lauderdale and Miami with their best shot of the view. And then you can see continuing into the Bahamas there. And there's Nassau at T plus 3 minutes and 35 seconds or so. And that is the continued path outwards. So, for these Starlink missions, if you are anywhere within that red circle, definitely keep an eye out, especially for the chance of that jellyfish. We are now about 42 minutes away from the currently planned liftoff of the Starlink 6-58 mission. And we have not heard anything to the contrary yet, that they are encountering any issues and are still targeting 8:53 p.m. Eastern Time. Here's one from Canon Copeland. And Trevor, I'll put this one to you. They're asking, no stubby nozzle tonight, right? In parentheses, I hope.
Thankfully, no stubby nozzle. The stubby nozzle, right, decreases the vehicle's performance by, we don't have the best idea of how much it decreases delta V by, but my total guess would be somewhere on the order of 5 to 10%. So they don't want to use that on missions where they need every ounce of performance that the vehicle has to offer. And these Starlink missions are very much missions where SpaceX needs every ounce of performance that they can get. And that's why they're continually pushing the vehicle harder and harder on these missions, right? We saw that when Block 5 first came out, it had a max payload capacity of roughly 15.5 tons. And now they've done missions that are have a payload capacity of over 17 tons. So that's another 1.5 tons of performance that they've gotten out of the vehicle for every single mission. And that's just not something that would be possible if they decided to use stubby nozzles on these flights. So that nozzle is meant for substantially lower performance missions where they can get away with that loss of performance.
Right, we had seen one recently over on the West Coast on one of the launches over there, but for the Starlink launches here on the East Coast, it's pretty much always going to be a full-sized Merlin vacuum engine as opposed to, as we refer it, the stubby nozzle. And you could also see weather-wise, look at the flags on the right side there. Absolutely no movement, no flapping of the flags. The weather looks great. The countdown clock still anticipating the scheduled launch of Starliner no earlier than the 17th which would be this coming Friday at 6:16 p.m. Eastern Time. And it looks like a couple of nerds with their cameras set up on the lawn there. I don't know who they might be. I don't know, maybe Max and D. Hey, there it is. You can see you can see Max waving right there. Hi, Max. I do want to thank some people as Max is over there waving to us. Turtle Wolf, thank you for gifting a Red Team membership. Mark, thank you for becoming a Red Team member. Uncle Yukon, thank you for gifting 5 Red Team memberships, another name that we see here quite often. Bideford, with the generous support with a happy birthday Julia wish in there.
Thank you.
Peter Thompson saying a good luck toasted marshmallow for the launch and fingers crossed for a jellyfish tonight. Hopefully you'll get to see it, and now I want s'mores. Thank you very much. And then Daniel Rydell saying the OCD in me wonders why the 4th lightning tower, the one in the back right from our camera's strobe, is not on the same side as the others. Julia, do we have any knowledge of that? Or is it just the way it was
As
set up?
I'm looking, as I'm looking toward the pad at Cars Park, I'm like, well, I guess I do only see 3 as well. But you got to figure one of them is facing the Atlantic, and that might be an important thing for any inbound planes, as we do have air traffic around here, and sometimes that air traffic does fly over Cape. Could also be kind of a beacon out on the ocean as well, kind of like its own little lighthouse. So I'd like to think, although your OCD disagrees, they're not all pointing the same way for a safety reason.
Yeah, it could be a bit annoying, but just keep in mind, once we get launches from 39B again, that only has 3 towers, so 3 lights is normal.
Well, also, I think they're just pointed like somewhat radially out, and the light is being blocked by the rod. So I think they are rotationally symmetric.
That could be too. But yes, for those with OCD, I still can absolutely see how that might be annoying. Here's a really interesting question. As you mentioned at the beginning, Trevor, this is the 50th SpaceX or the 50th launch this year for them. So, how are we looking in terms of reaching the original plan for 148 launches by the end of the year? What do you think, Trevor?
That is a very good question. So, right, it is May 13th, not April, gosh, which is the 134th day of the year. So, what's 134 over 365? So we're, just over a third of the way through. So if we do 50 divided by 0.36, that gives 139 launches this year, if you assume that they are not going to have any increase in cadence. And that's just not a good assumption to have, right? If you look at even the first 2 months of the year compared to the last 2 months, SpaceX has just been having a remarkable cadence where they've been reaching the 12 launches needed per month. And last month, they hit that 12 launch per month number while having a very substantial delay on one of their launch pads. So they hit that really with only having 2 missions, if I remember correctly, out of Vandenberg. So if you kind of extrapolate that they're going to have their cadence is going to continually increase, and they're not going to be hopefully hitting some of these technical problems that they had in the first quarter or so of the year, then frankly, SpaceX can quite easily, in my opinion, reach that 150 launch goal, 148 launch goal, assuming that weather cooperates and they don't have any substantial issues. And right, this is where Kiko and John Edwards on Twitter have constantly been posting about how, they have a very reliable vehicle at the moment, and that is only possible because of the team constantly staying paranoid and constantly being hungry for this. So I think if SpaceX keeps that attitude, keeps working just incredibly hard at what they're doing like they have been, and probably working even harder, they'll reach that. I am honestly thinking that they're going to reach that 148 launch goal.
Oh,
I
but let me step in for just a moment and say we do have hurricane season starting here June 1st. So, listeners out there, if you are in these coastal areas, please make sure we're getting ready for that. And B, hopefully we use the beginning part of this hurricane season to our advantage and keep the cadence up, maybe ramp it up a little bit, because being diligent is good. We just don't want to take any unnecessary risks out at sea, although there are some beastly tugs that bring these drone ships out. There are conditions, as we've seen out at sea with 1058, that are just not favorable for bringing a booster home safely and could lead to, the endangerment of the crews out there. So hopefully we get some extra launches in ahead of this and Mother Nature behaves so that we can reach that goal.
That is indeed what we are hoping. And most importantly, we are also hoping for a launch tonight to keep that cadence going as we have passed the T-minus 35-minute mark, which is when fueling should begin. And we do have confirmation SpaceX fueling is underway. So, how that's going to go down, as you can see there on the left side of your screen, they were given the go for propellant load at T-minus 38 minutes. And as we speak, RP1, rocket propellant 1, which is a refined form of kerosene, is being loaded into the first stage along with liquid oxygen, or LOX, as you see there. Also being loaded is the RP1 into the second stage. That is not currently loading the LOX or LOXygen. That will happen at T-minus 16 minutes. T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds is when we expect the RP1 load to be completed on stage 2, and that will lead to the famous T-minus 20 minute, 20 second vent, aka the best vent. And once that venting ceases, that is when LOX load should be underway. And then we will proceed all the way through the countdown with fuel loading ending at about 2 minutes and 10 seconds before launch. So always a good sign. We are getting closer, and keep an eye out now for the frost starting to form on the rocket. Love it, love it. Let's see here. We're talking about, again, while there is that tweet, by the way, I should point out, from SpaceX of the propellant load underway ahead of tonight's Starlink launch from Florida. Talking about that cadence of trying to get to that 148 mark, one of the biggest things has been their marine assets. Now, Just Read the Instructions got a big upgrade back in January, but now, Trevor, it's kind of being taken out of commission again for a little bit.
Yeah, this was something that our very own Gavin spotted and tweeted this, that Bob departed Port Canaveral and is heading down to Freeport in the Bahamas, and curious to see what the trip is for Just Read the Instructions, since it just had a major month-long overhaul back in January. And then thankfully, Kiko responded, just saying nothing major, but Just Read the Instructions needs a quick dry dock stop for additional preventative maintenance. It's important these vessels are ready to sustain a fast recovery cadence as the launch rate increases. So, always good to see that nothing major is going on with the vehicle, but SpaceX is just wanting to, make sure that the vehicle is ready to do even more launches. So I imagine that they just saw a little bit of data that they weren't super happy with, or somewhere they weren't expecting, and want to make sure that doesn't get too much further. But right as we're seeing from this launch, this shouldn't slow down their cadence too much this month. If they're really able to do 4-day turnaround times of a single drone ship, like this mission will be, one drone ship will barely be able to hold them over while Just Read the Instructions has that maintenance going on.
And I think it's also important noting that they are doing this maintenance in the Bahamas. It was seen by satellite imagery from our own Harry in Freeport. So at this point, rather than having to bring it all the way back to the Cape, or as they did for the major refurbishments up towards the Carolinas, it could be, oh, we'll give it a couple days, fix what we got to fix, and then it's already out there and ready for the next Starlink mission with a drone ship landing. So it's
Yeah,
nice.
and there's that photo from Harry. That is such a cool shot. And right, SpaceX is currently targeting the next launch from the Cape is not until Friday. So I could imagine that by Friday, maybe they'll just read the instructions, will be ready. If not, they have, I'm sure they have another launch, Starlink launch from the Cape scheduled in that time.
Right. Also, just a fun note that with the next launch there, that would be 2 launches on Friday, May 17th, with Starliner scheduled for 6:16 p.m. Eastern and Starlink 6-59 for 7:52 p.m. Eastern Time. Less than 2-hour turnaround time between both of those missions currently scheduled for Friday, but that is always subject to change, so make sure you have the next spaceflight app so that you can keep an eye on that.
I personally would be surprised if the 45th is able to support those 2 launches that quickly back to back. Because keep in mind, Atlas does not have AFTS, Automatic Flight Termination System, and instead has manual FTS. And in interviews that we've done with the 45th in the past, they've said that turnaround time from a mission without AFTS to one with is a good bit longer than 2 missions with AFTS. And to be fair, this information that they said is several years old at this point, so they very easily could have upgraded their systems or whatever to be prepared for a moment like this. However, my gut feeling is that seems really quick for the 45th to be able to go from supporting Atlas to supporting Starlink.
Julia, as someone who's down on the Space Coast there regularly and over near the Space Force area, what are your thoughts? Do you think they'd be able to do that turnaround?
I mean, it's not impossible. The seas are nice right now, so yeah, I think we can. Yeah, totally.
You think it'd
I
be
think we can
possible
do
on
it.
Friday to go from Starliner to Starlink?
Heck yeah, why not? I mean, we've proven a lot of things this year, so let's just add one more really fast turnaround to the deal.
I'm all for it. Already there, might as well go see another launch, right? More launches, more better. Here's a question from Jeff, and this is probably for you, Trevor, with the assistance from Alex in the back channel already, asking how many active Falcon 9 boosters are in use these days?
So I think the word active it's kind of hard to define what exactly you mean by that because, right, SpaceX has a number of boosters that they're routinely going through for these Starlink missions and whatnot. And those are absolutely active no matter whose definition you go by. But then SpaceX also has a bunch of boosters that are kind of reserved for upcoming missions. So for example, B-1064 and B-1065 are reserved for Europa Clipper. And then there's also boosters that have completed testing at McGregor, but have not yet had their first launch. So depending exactly on how you count it, there are 17 total boosters in the fleet, and 3 other boosters that have already been tested at McGregor, but have not been used yet. And I think most of those are for GOES U, which is no earlier than June 25th. So, yay, we have a Falcon Heavy mission coming up. That'll be very exciting. So yeah, it kind of depends on how you want to define that, but roughly 17.
There you go. Roughly 17. Did you go through all the exact numbers that Alex has listed here?
No, but I can if you want. Florida has B-1062, 67, 69, 73, 76, 77, 78, 80, and 83, plus 64 and 65, which are reserved for Europa Clipper. And Vandy has 6 boosters, which are 61, 63, 71, 75, 81, and 82. And at least Alex and I are kind of expecting SpaceX to want to increase that Vandenberg fleet in the near future. But we don't know when the next new Falcon 9 will be or which coast it will go to.
Right, besides what we already know of the side cores for GOES-U.
Right.
So, along those lines, Ben Glasgow asking, do you think we will ever see a new version of Falcon 9? And I'll pose this one to you, Julia. Or do you think they just come out with a new booster?
My gosh. I think they might just come out with a new booster, but that's hard to say. I know we're trying to reuse as much as possible, but we also don't know exactly how many missions we can get out of a booster. So it's possible there might just be a new one.
And
Right.
again, I'm going to ask the question that this kind of goes down to, how do you define a new version? Right, will we ever see Falcon 9 2.0? No, absolutely not. Will we ever see a V1.3? No. However, will we see, I don't think we're going to see a Block 6 of V1.2 either, but it's very possible that, and we know that SpaceX has continually been doing these sub-block upgrades, where they don't make huge changes to the vehicle, but they make fairly minor ones, and all of these small changes eventually add up to big changes that allows them to, as we were mentioning earlier, add an additional 1.5 tons to 2 tons of payload capacity to Falcon 9. And then, of course, this is also allowing them to reuse the boosters quicker and do less refurbishment, and same thing with the fairing halves. So do you count these smaller upgrades as a version upgrade? You know, in some sense, I could see the argument of no, but also very much it's not like every Falcon 9 booster at this point is the same. In fact, I imagine every single Falcon 9 booster is slightly different.
And yeah, you bring up a good point. I guess these small upgrades are what I consider another version, although we haven't exactly changed the decimal point. It used to be we had a block 4 point whatever. And we haven't really changed that, which means these block 5s have, like you said, a variation of capabilities amongst them. Like the newer ones have their sea legs that the older ones do not, and those sea legs will be tested this hurricane season. So, and along with that also does come the fact that you don't want to go too new, because then that may lead to new qualifications as well. And we don't probably want to go through a whole new qualification for crewed and resupply flights.
I was going to say, it's very important, worth noting there, that the current iteration of Falcon 9 Block 5 is crew rated. Any major significant dramatic changes would require them likely to re-go through the crew certification. Probably not as extensive as it was from no vehicle to Falcon 9 for the first time, but still. So I guess it's probably, you could say, like, you know, Falcon 9 Block 5 version 1.2.00001. Like the little upgrades that they add on to the end. The base is still the same. And I don't see them creating a Falcon 9 version 2. As Elon has mentioned in the past, the plan is to continue flying Falcon 9 and then retire it and have everything launch in terms of SpaceX launches from Starship. We're still a ways away from that, probably at least a decade, if not more, but it's something to keep in mind that they're not going to upgrade Falcon 9 if they're already planning on retiring it in place of Starship. And it's a shame if they do that, because what's going to happen at a countdown at T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds? Because we are just about to hit that right now here at Slick 40 for this particular mission, as we get the T-minus 20-minute vent, aka the best vent. And you see it kind of starting to form there. Trevor, what is happening during this vent?
Yeah, so this is just a chill down of those lines ahead of stage 2 liquid oxygen load. So like you mentioned at the start of at the start of fueling, SpaceX begins with only filling or loading RP1 onto stage 2. And the reason why they start with RP1 is because RP1, right, they chill down to a little bit below room temperature, but it's several hundred degrees warmer than liquid oxygen. So they don't super have to worry about it warming up. When with the liquid oxygen, they do have to worry about it warming up, and they want the liquid oxygen to be as cool as possible for launch. So they want to start loading it as late as possible. And the reason why this is somewhat unique to Falcon 9 is because they do super chill that liquid oxygen, whereas other companies keep it right around that boiling point. So what this vent is doing is it's preparing that line for liquid oxygen load on stage 2. They're running some, I believe it's liquid oxygen through it, which then, as it reaches some of the warmer parts of the line, becomes this vapor and is then vented out of the TE, which we are seeing now. So this is very similar to, for all of y'all Starbase people in chat, the tower vent at Starbase and also the OLM vent at Starbase. All the same idea of you don't want to start loading when a propellant when the lines are warm. I think Sawyer may be talking while muted.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah. And I know Alex pointed out the tower and OLM vents. I think those are decently good vents, but T-minus 20 minutes still the best vent. Especially looking at it now, you could see that it's kind of just accumulating at the bottom of the rocket. And Julia, that also kind of gives us a good idea of the weather at the Cape right now. And it seems like everything is pretty calm and still there.
Yeah, I would say that's a good assessment. As you can see by the venting, it's falling down. It's not being blown away. There's a very, very light breeze out here at Cars Park tonight, but absolutely nothing to be concerned about for launch tonight.
Beautiful. And you could see the skies there earlier. Absolutely gorgeous sunset there looking west. Beautiful. Oh, that does not get old, especially with the VAB there. I'm sorry. It's just no matter how many times you go there. Yeah.
I love our planet so much.
Exactly. And there's just something magical about the Kennedy Space Center at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. And it's worth noting that the KSC security, as we like to call it, is out tonight. This is a video from Max. And yes, that is exactly what you think it is. It is Florida being Florida with a gator. They are quite common, surprisingly, around the KSC press site and Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Keeping in mind also that all of this land for the launch sites and everything is a part of a wildlife reserve too. So you get a lot of animals, a lot of different creatures all the time at KSC. The number of times I've had to stop in the road for turtles and things like that, I'm sure, Julia, you've had the same experience.
Yeah. As far as driving, I counted 1, 2, 3. It was 4 tortoises that I had to slow down for the other day going across base, and the other night when we were enjoying the the lovely northern lights, a hog. Fun fact, I am actually more afraid of the wild hogs than I am of a gator. And a hog was in the brush in the dark behind my car. It was great.
Oh, that's not terrifying at all.
Nope, not at all. But all of our friends in the NSF Discord sure got to see that moment. I was freaking out, but I made it safe to my car, and here I am tonight.
There you go. You survived the wild hogs. But yes, they can be quite mean out there. I will say that of some of the KSC wildlife. And Crispy in the back saying pigs aren't scary. Enjoy yourself next to one of these hogs and then report back to Julia and I.
You bring me a baby piglet and I'll be in heaven. You bring me a wild hog and those tusks. Nope. Nope.
For some reason recently my YouTube short feed has been full of this guy who hunts Burmese pythons in the Everglades, and he'll just like walk barefoot past all of these like enormous snakes and alligators and all of that, and I don't get it. It is insane.
Florida man at its finest. As we reach under 15 minutes now to scheduled launch, Starlink 6-58 fueling continuing, and right now liquid oxygen also loading into the second stage with that venting stopped. I want to take a moment here and thank some support. Roseanne with a very kind message saying, "Happy birthday, Julia." So thank you for the support and the kind message there. Coco Cats, thank you for gifting a Red Team membership. Steve Kalovic saying, "Happy Mother's Day to the best mom ever. She's watching." Oh, that's very sweet. And happy Mother's Day to all of the mothers out there this evening. And in particular, I'll shout out my mom as well, Sherry. Love you very, very much as well. One Air, thank you for becoming a Red Team member. Richard, thank you for gifting 5 Red Team memberships. John Depker, thank you for gifting 5 Red Team memberships. Also coming in with a question saying, "My little one Victoria wants to know how popular Falcon 9 is." Adding, I'm guessing she means how it performs versus its competitors. Trevor, you want to try and take that one on?
Yeah, how popular. So I mean, from a pure like popularity perspective, it's probably the second most popular modern rocket, only behind Starship. Right, SpaceX has a way of hyping up the public. Right, their rockets are gorgeous. Their mission is, I mean, honestly, I think it's hard to find a mission that's not that's more inspiring than SpaceX's goal of landing humans on the surface of Mars. So it is a very popular rocket, and it's also very popular to all of the customers. Right, Falcon 9 is, I think you can safely say at this point, it is the most reliable rocket ever. And there are very, very few situations where there are very few situations where it is worse than other vehicles on the market. So it is a little bit less capable in the very, very high energy missions, and that's just because the second stage is RP1 instead of liquid hydrogen. But there's a reason why Falcon 9 is launching on the order of 150 times a year, when the second most launched rocket is Electron, which is launched 4 or 5 times this year. So the scale at which SpaceX is operating this vehicle is literally an order of magnitude greater than everyone else, and that just goes to show it probably is the most popular rocket right now with customers.
Yeah, and I think even more impressive than that is that it's also that reliable too. So I
Yeah.
don't want to jinx it, but it's getting quite the reputation for reliability.
Yeah, I think this will be like the 305th or some low 300s consecutive Falcon 9 mission. Then this will be the 233rd consecutive booster landing, and that's like a secondary objective that they've reached 233 with. And, the payload fairings are all reused now, so, this vehicle is substantially cheaper than anything else on the market, and at the end of the day, that's what the customer cares about. If it puts your payload into an accurate orbit reliably and is cheap, that's kind of everything you could possibly want.
There you go. And great question as well from Victoria there from your little one, John. So thank you for passing that along to us. Snot Garden saying, "Thanks for the great coverage as always. The best wildlife is on comms tonight." I mean, I've been called an animal before, but I don't think that's what he means. Megados, not Ardos, I don't think. Thank you for becoming a Padrat member. Joe Howard, thank you for gifting 5 Red Team memberships. Black Hawk, New Zealand, thank you for gifting 5 Red Team memberships. Ralph Bickford, thank you for gifting a Red Team membership. Mark Deeb saying Happy Mother's Day to Ashley. And John saying, with a quote from Victoria, thank you for answering my question. Feel free to send any more questions you have our way, Victoria, because that is a really good question. All right. Here's a good one. While we are getting more people in as we now approach under 10 minutes until the scheduled T0, we've heard all the talk about the solar storms and the impact that it's already had on Starlink satellites, where even some of our own team members have experienced dropouts during this solar storm. Sonia wants to know, what is the chance of the solar storms affecting this launch? And Trevor, we have seen past Starlink satellites be affected by solar weather during/after launch.
Yeah, I think it was the first Starlink V2 mini mission, Starlink Group 6-1, if I remember correctly, where we saw that the payload was completely deployed nominally into orbit. However, due to some recent solar activity, it kind of caused the Earth's atmosphere to swell a little bit, meaning that there is more drag at that initial insertion altitude, causing them to lose almost all of the satellites from that one mission. And I mean, right, this just goes to show that for a normal customer, that would be a huge, huge problem to lose an entire mission like that, right? We've seen when other satellites have been lost, companies' stock tank by 10, 20, 30% because of it. But because at the scale SpaceX is operating, you know, they certainly weren't happy about it, but it wasn't the end of the world. So since that, I believe they have started putting in the satellites into a slightly higher initial orbit than they used to, which kind of helps prevent that. But it's definitely a possibility on this mission that the Earth's atmosphere will be a little bit more swollen, and therefore increase the drag that these satellites experience. However, I'm sure, you know, SpaceX has a bunch of people that are predicting this and helping work around this. So I'm sure that the payload will be fine, right? As we always say, SpaceX's team truly is world class, and I'm sure that they won't make that mistake again.
And this isn't the kind of swelling that aspirin can help with.
I don't think there's a large enough aspirin to help reduce the atmosphere swelling.
Well, we are coming up now on T-minus 7 minutes. Julia, I know you and Sean out there have some cameras set up, and we'll let you tend to those, and we will catch back up with you, Julia, after launch.
We will see you after launch, hopefully with some beautiful pictures to share.
Hopefully a beautiful birthday candle for you tonight. Speaking of being under the T-minus 7 minute mark, that is also when they start the engine chill on those 9 Merlin 1D engines. Why do we chill it, and I guess how do they chill it as well too, Trevor?
Yeah, so just like we were talking about with that T-minus 20 minute vent, super, super cold propellant and ambient temperatures don't go very well together. And this is especially true in the engines. So what SpaceX does is they run a little bit of liquid oxygen through the turbo pump of the engine. And this helps bring the entire engine assembly down closer to that minus 210 centigrade temperature that the liquid oxygen is. So what you don't want to have happen is at T-minus 2.7 seconds when they begin that engine ignition process, you don't want a bunch of the super, super cold liquid oxygen to hit a room level room temperature engine, which then will cause the liquid oxygen to immediately become a gas, expanding rapidly, destroying your engine. So instead, they want that propellant to hit a cold engine so that expansion doesn't happen. So that's what we're seeing now. And we can't see venting from the base of the vehicle from this angle, but there is venting from the base of the vehicle to help with this. And this is the exact same thing that we see on any engine, right? We see this at Starbase with the Raptor engines. We saw this on every space shuttle launch with those RS-25s. We see this on SLS. Basically, any vehicle that's not hypergolic, you'll see this behavior on.
And so now we will start seeing a couple of final preparations underway at the launch pad. And that includes the strongback, which is part of the transporter erector there that brings it out from the little hangar, the horizontal integration facility, out to the launch pad at 4.5 minutes, so approximately right around now. There are some clamps that will open from underneath the payload fairing, and then it will lean back 1.8 degrees away from the rocket. It will fully throw back once we hit the T0, but this is kind of just to get it slightly away from the rocket ahead of the launch itself, which is a milestone of getting that much closer. We will also hopefully soon be getting callouts of fueling completing in the next 2 minutes or so on the entire vehicle, including the liquid oxygen and the RP1, the rocket propellant 1, the refined form of kerosene, into the first and second stages. So we should have hopefully a fully fueled vehicle in the next minute and 40 seconds or so.
Or, again, the 50th time this year, including Starship.
Which is absolutely crazy still to think. So as we approach under 3.5 minutes now, the vehicle fully frosty there, looking good. The next major events, besides the fueling completing, we will know that is complete as well, especially in the second stage when we get one more final vent similar to the T-minus 20-minute vent indicating that the liquid oxygen has been fully loaded. That will clear out the lines one last time to make sure there's no remaining supercooled liquid oxygen or gaseous oxygen, even for that matter, left over in those lines that could ignite as the rocket flies by it with those giant flaming engines. And we should have stage 1 LOX load complete at this point, so the liquid oxygen completely loaded up into the main booster there. Again, booster 1073 going on its 15th flight with a planned landing southeast from the launch site on the drone ship A Shortfall of Gravitas.
And once again, it's worth repeating that assuming SpaceX is able to get this mission off the ground here in about 2 minutes, this will be the quickest turnaround time of a landing zone to date at 4 days, 6 hours, and 11 minutes, cutting that down by 17 hours from the previous record, which is quite remarkable. I think if you would have asked Alex and I a year ago if they would be doing 4-day turnarounds of drone ships on the East Coast, I think Alex and I would have said no.
Yeah, you're probably right. We have completion of stage 2 LOX load. Again, the liquid oxygen there. So expect one more final vent coming from the top of the vehicle there as we reach 90 seconds until liftoff. Coming up at the T-minus 1 minute mark, we will have 2 major events. That is Falcon 9 entering startup. That is when the onboard computers will take control of the final part of the count. That is also when all of the tanks are pressurized to flight levels. And that should be happening momentarily. And as you can see, it is worth noting, when we do look at the SpaceX feed, their clock is a little bit behind ours by about 10 seconds. So that is the slight discrepancy there. But at this point, Falcon 9 should be in startup. And we have confirmation of that. So the next thing will be the launch director verifying that they are go for launch. And we should get that momentarily. Coming up now on T-minus 30 seconds. And we have the go for launch. We are now about 20 seconds away.
Yeah, pay attention to the base of the vehicle. Given it's night, we may be able to see that bright green flash.
That is the T-tab, which ignites the engines at T-minus 3 seconds. We're now about 10 seconds away. And I promise once it lifts off, we will be quiet so you can enjoy the fantastic sounds of the launch audio. There is that flash. We have ignition and liftoff of Starlink 6-58. Go, Starlink Internet satellites, go. What a view there. Contrail indicating that we've passed through max Q, maximum aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle, as well as the speed of sound. Everything looking beautiful so far with this launch as we are about 90 seconds into flight. Maybe a little blurry, but the colors that we get from it, there it is. You could see that blue off the back there. I absolutely love that.
Yeah, that little bit of, I believe that comes from the CH4, not CH4, the RP1 emission lines at high enough temperatures. In the dark, it's noticeable, but we're never able to see it during the day.
Look at that great view of the tail there, which as we get into the thinner atmosphere, you can see things expanding, and we're about 15-ish seconds away from a few events in rapid succession. First will be main engine cutoff, or MECO, followed shortly thereafter by stage separation, and then ignition of the second stage in what's known as SES-1. So let's stand by for those. There's MECO, main engine cutoff. There is the stage separation. And ignition of the Merlin vacuum engine. Once again, without the stiffener ring, it appears, but that is now proceeding to bring those satellites into orbit. Meanwhile, you can still see the plasma interactions as those grid fins deploy on the left side of your screen. And that is the view of the second stage from our cameras on the ground. Absolutely spectacular.
I always
Look at
love these nighttime Falcon 9 launches because you can see so much.
That is very much like the that jellyfish kind of there. You can see the plume expansion at least. Absolutely beautiful. And shout out to our teams on the ground there as it continues to be tracked. So in the meantime now, the first stage is on its way towards a shortfall of gravitas located southeast of the launch site, a little over 600 kilometers downrange. You can see the cold gas jet thrusters firing to make small tweaks and adjustments in its positioning, with the next major event for that first stage being the first stage entry burn. That should happen in a little under 2 minutes from now. That's an approximately 20-second burn that will help slow the vehicle down as it goes through the atmosphere, literally using its own flames as sort of a cone to create a sort of heat shield and protect that first stage. 4.5 minutes in, excuse me. And Trevor, everything looking smooth here.
Yeah, indeed. Right at this point, as you were mentioning, we're coming up on that entry burn, which, if you are wearing your Falcon 9 launch, reentry, and landing merch, you'll know will be with 3 engines. So they start with that center E9 engine, and then go on to ignite E1 and E5 on either side, whereas the landing burn will just be that single center engine.
There you go. And there's actually a look up into the inner stage with the pusher mechanism there on the left side of your screen of that first stage view. And
Yes,
again, this
that
booster on its 15th flight.
Yeah, that central pusher, which you can see, is actually more of the backup pusher system. You can kind of see those 3 radially spaced 120 degrees throughout the side. That's kind of the main separation system. Then they have the central one as backup.
Exactly. Again, B1073 on the left, 23 Starlink internet satellites on the right. We should be coming up on that entry burn any moment now. So we will keep an eye on it on screen here. And I know our team at the Cape is also going to keep an eye on the horizon as well to see if it is visible there, which sometimes anyone along the southeastern coast of Florida there, if you're near the horizon, you might be able to see it. And in fact, there it is. There is our Cape team capturing that entry burn as it fights fire with fire from the ground. Unbelievable. So, Trevor, how does it, fight fire with fire, as we say? How does that help protect the vehicle from these crazy temperatures?
Yeah, so as you see at the bottom left of your screen right now, that is telemetry of stage 1. So they rapidly slow down stage 1, and that's important because, give or take, this is a good first order approximation. Temperature, or max temperature, is roughly proportional to the speed cubed. So if they're able to bring down that max velocity by 50%, then they're able to decrease peak heating by whatever 0.5 cubed is, so what 1/8. So it's purely just that reduction in speed, and then also the exhaust can kind of go around the vehicle and help protect it through some of the higher portions of that reentry. However, at that point, the reentry heating wouldn't be too high anyway.
Coming up now on what will be the landing burn, which will hopefully end with it on top of a shortfall of gravitas. And then that will be followed shortly after by second engine cutoff 1, or SECO, which will be the shutdown of the Merlin vacuum engine. It will have one more firing 45 minutes after it first shuts down. But right now, the focus on the first stage here on the left side of your screen. You can now also see the grid fins acting as their steering, which is used more so in the thicker parts of the atmosphere, as they're right above the deck. Landing leg deploy. And touchdown, booster 1073, notching another launch and another landing under its belt.
And that is SpaceX's 307th booster landing and 233rd consecutive. And like we mentioned earlier, a new record for the quickest turnaround time of a landing zone.
That was absolutely fantastic. Great to hear the records there. And it appeared as if everything was nominal as well, with that first burn of the second stage, placing them in their initial orbit, as mentioned prior to that second burn, at about T plus 50 minutes into the mission. Julia, from our Cape team out in the field, how was this one? I believe we have Julia back for comms. Oh,
Maybe
well,
talking while muted?
no, it's a technical issue on her end, so we'll get back to her commentary momentarily. But beautiful view there, the empty launch pad. We are
Yes, this
working
is
on replays, though, I do want to point out. So let's get those. We are going to get the replays loaded up, so stick with us. We're still answering more of your questions. We've got some amazing stuff coming from the field. Sorry to interrupt you there, Trevor. Go ahead.
no, all good. I was just gonna say this is a great view of just how much that strong back throws back. So right, keep in mind ahead of launch, that was basically parallel with the launch tower, and then it turns back by approximately 1.8 degrees and then throws back all the way to what that looks like, maybe 50 degrees or something like that, past launch. And if we get lucky, SpaceX may return the TE to vertical while we're showing replays. They've recently been going back to that vertical position and preparing the launch site already just remarkably quickly.
Would not be surprised. Again, replays are in the works as we speak here. In the meantime, I can finally address the support that came in during the key parts of the launch, which apologies if we don't get to them during that, but want to make sure we address them now. Space Nerd 67 saying, love you guys. Thanks for all the work you do for us. It's greatly appreciated. We only do it because you watch and help with support like that. So thank you. And again, even if you can't support monetarily, literally just watching the stream, hitting the like button, things like that, make a huge difference. So we appreciate it. Bob Davis saying Happy Mother's Day to Elisa Davis. Shadow Mask saying Falcon punch through the atmosphere. Very, very clever there. Larry Phillips, thank you for becoming a Pad Rat member. Roseanne, thank you as well for... Come on, there we go. Now it's clicking. Roseanne, thank you as well for the support. We try and have as low latency as possible in all of our streams here. Corvus Cortex, thank you for becoming a Pad Rat member. JJ Jones, thank you for becoming a Capcom member. Reminder, Capcom and above gets access to the NSF Discord, so hopefully we will see you in there. And Trevor, another question from Victoria for you via John Depker. Victoria's curious how hot the exhaust flame is, and especially what we saw there near the end of the first stage burn. How long is the flame?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm not entirely sure what the exhaust heat is off the top of my head. I think so this depends on a lot of things, such as the propellants that the engine uses, so what it's burning, and also the type of engine. And I think that Merlin is probably right around 2000 centigrade exhaust temperature. So that's, you don't want to be touching that. And then how long it is, my guess is about 140 meters at that point. So it is very long. Anywhere from as long as the vehicle to twice as long during ascent. And right, this is the same thing that, I don't know if you've seen the photos of Starship during its launch, but we've seen this just enormously long exhaust trail. And it's gorgeous to see.
You know what else is gorgeous to see? Launch replays. And I believe we have them ready already. Kevin Michael Reed, do you mind queuing them up for us, please? This is from one of our remote cameras overlooking the press site there. See it turn from night into day. Absolutely beautiful there. Gives you an idea of how bright everything really is. If the video's still going there. If not, you could just get an idea of how it hangs. There it is. Oh, it is moving, yeah. Just that slow start, but then it picks up really quickly. Tell you, there's something about night launches. Have you seen any of the night launches, Trevor, or have all of yours been day launches?
It's this is a sad question. I have not seen any launches.
Well, that answers that question then.
So
I
therefore,
apologize.
the statement that all of the launches I have seen have been night launches is vacuous. So technically, it's true.
For some reason, I thought you had seen at least one at Wallops.
No, I've never even been to Wallops.
Huh. We'll have to change that someday. We will need to get you out here for a launch then.
I know. I maybe this summer. I really need to see one. It's honestly just embarrassing that I haven't.
And you got goes coming up. Anyway,
It's true.
continuing our.
I could
replay-
goes to that.
Fun token awarded. Taking a look at the next view here. This one definitely a human-operated camera as opposed to the previous two, which were some of our robotic cameras. You can hear the bugs at the microphone there. Welcome to Florida. We'll let you enjoy the sound from this replay. Got that VAB squeal in there as well. This from our tracking camera. But yeah, there's something about that VAB squeal. Again, the resonance that comes off of those Merlin 1D engines just so happens to resonate with the paneling on the vehicle assembly building. You really hear it best when it's coming from pad 40 because it's a dead-on view to the VAB. Same thing with the landing zones as well, just based off of their almost direct view of the vehicle assembly building. And with that rattling, you get the really cool squeal sound. This is the view from Fleet Cam, which we have located atop Rusty's down in Port Canaveral. I love the reflection of the water from this shot. Any thoughts, Trevor? Because
I love rockets. That's my thoughts.
I could just stare at this all day.
Yeah. And I guess we may as well talk about what the second stage is doing right now. Sorry, it's currently in that roughly 45-minute long coast phase. And at T plus 53 minutes, if I remember off the top of my head, SpaceX will do, T plus 54 minutes, SpaceX will do a very, very short burn to circularize that orbit. And a few minutes after that, start rotating the second stage end over end before deploying those 23 Starlink satellites. And that will take the Starlink constellation to 6,000 satellites on orbit, of which about 5901 of them are currently working. So it's just amazing that this constellation is real and has been privately funded.
And don't forget, you keep an eye on how many of these are actually launched and in orbit and everything on our Friday shows this week in spaceflight. So they'll go over a bunch of the numbers, as well as at the end of the month, the launch numbers per company, per country, excuse me. So. Crackle. And no, not grackle, as I know some of our NSF team would prefer there. But yes, that crackling sound, the tracking on that, absolutely beautiful. Another successful launch for SpaceX. There it is, was waiting for Gage, who's one of our team members that does a lot of camera work behind the scenes, especially with Space Coast Live, our 24/7 cameras pointed at the Cape, and Gary the Grackle. So yeah. Julie, I believe we also have you back now. Get your input on how the sound and everything was for this particular launch as we take a look at your streak shot, which is also stunning.
Why, thank you. Well, it was a beautiful launch. As you guys saw, there were some nice colors as the rocket was pitching downrange, and the sound maybe wasn't quite as loud as it was for Max and Dee out there, but it was a beautiful crackle out here as well. And I'd say that was a beautiful birthday candle.
There you go. Beautiful birthday gift indeed. And again, fantastic work as always with that shot there. So, and I believe you were mentioning Max. I believe we have a photo from Max as well with that very nice slow fade there, Kevin. I like that. Gorgeous view of liftoff from Max Evans out in the field there. Again, props to the team at the Cape. As someone who's only there part of the time, the guys out there that are full-time are just stunning and produce amazing work. So, well done. I do also want to thank Karen for becoming a Pad Rat member. Live NBC saying great launch, happy Mother's Day to the Queen. And Ellisers, thank you for becoming a Capcom member. Again, Capcom and above gets access to the NSF Discord. So come on in, say hi, and shoot us a message. But what I do want to do is shoot a message to our fantastic team and thank them for all of their hard work for tonight's stream, including those who were on air. Trevor, thank you for joining me for fantastic commentary.
Yeah, of course. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll be here as always with all of the space news.
Yes, thank you as well, Julia Bergeron, the birthday girl out in the field for tonight's launch. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for coming to celebrate with me as we watched a rocket launch.
Yes, and then behind the scenes, you have Max Evans, who was down at the press site there operating one of the cameras, and then the other camera operated by D-Wise. So, amazing team out in the field. And then, of course, behind the scenes, pushing the buttons, pulling the levers, Mr. Kevin Michael Reed. Thank you, as always, for your support. We do have one more fantastic launch view, which we will show you on the way out here. But thank you for watching. Stick around with NSF. There's a lot of exciting things happening in this coming week. In fact, we just got word recently of an anomaly that may have occurred with Ship 31 down at Starbase. So may have to go check that out over at Starbase Live 24/7. I've been your host, though, Sawyer Rosenstein. Thank you for joining us for another Starlink launch, and we will see you all again very soon.
And here we go.
We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RS-68 chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, Atlantic.
Water towers, fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside SPD off. Say again, SPD off. Off. It's orange!
45. Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage. Put that in the big bag, Eagle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
If the methane would be igniting in the flare, correct?